All right, everybody, welcome tonight. Thank you for coming out. This is our closing presentation for our Planapalooza. My name is Brian Rose. If you haven't met me yet, come up and introduce yourself. But I'm the city planner for the city of Gallatin. We're excited to be working on this project. It's a big undertaking to be rewriting our zoning ordinance, and it means a lot for the city as far as our future goes. And so just want to make that as it's an emphasis that I don't think can really be emphasized enough. This will be huge for the future of Gallatin. We want to see Gallatin be as awesome as it can be, and I really think that this new rewrite will help us to get there. Brian Wright is with TPUDC, Town Planning and Urban Design Collaborative. He's here tonight, and their team has been here for the past 4 days, diligently working on some ideas, listening to the community, having some different discussions. They've got a presentation tonight to show you exactly where they've gotten to so far. Of course, there's still a long way to go with writing the actual code. But very excited to see what they've got to show us tonight. So with that, I'm going to just go ahead and turn the time over to Brian to introduce himself and his team again, and we'll go with the presentation. So give him a round of applause.
Thanks. All right, so this ought to be fun. We've tried to find all the typos. So that's how we started, right? I cannot guarantee there are none. There may be new ones, in fact. We literally just finished the presentation a couple of minutes ago. No one has seen it. I've seen it, sort of, because I was working on it, but none of the staff or nobody from the city has seen it. So we're all going to see it together. Hopefully everyone likes it. And one of the things that I'll say is, if you've been participating over the past several days and you've shared an idea or a thought with us and you don't see it here, it doesn't mean that we've done away with it or we aren't trying to incorporate it somehow or whatever. This is just what we've been able to do in the past 3 or 4 days. So do we have any first-time people here? First-timers? Okay, cool, great. If you're not a first-timer, so you're a frequent flyer. What do you mean? So I'm Brian Wright. I'm the principal of Town Planning and Urban Design Collaborative, leading a team of consultants to help update your zoning ordinance. They are all in the back there, catching their breath. We've been working morning, noon, and into the night. You may have driven by and seen the lights on in here at strange hours. They have it set so the doors will lock when we leave, but we don't have a key, so we can't get back in, so we just have to keep working. I'm going to run through a presentation here. We're going to do Q&A at the end, and like I said, even things that are in here, I may even forget to talk about. So this is a kind of a work in progress. We're at the end of the beginning of a lengthy process of writing the zoning ordinance. So for those who haven't been here, we've had a lot of opportunities for engagement. We've been trying to make sure that the community has had an opportunity to plug in. So we had our kickoff on the 17th of June, the Planapalooza opening presentation on the 12th of July, a few days ago. Then we've had a series of technical meetings. Tonight's our work in progress presentation. And then we have the website as well. There are discussion forums, there's the mapping exercise, videos will all be up there so you can actually provide feedback and things on the webpage. As long as the links are working correctly. We heard there was maybe some issue with that, so test it out when you go home and let Brian Rose know if there's an issue. At the mapping workshop, on the first night, those who were here all gathered around tables, broke up into groups, and put dots on the map, blue for places that they saw for opportunities, red for areas that need improvement, and green for places that you love. And so we started looking at that. We took, and then each group presented their ideas to all of the other groups. So it was great to hear, because a lot of times when you have an idea or you're passionate about something, and your friends are too, you assume that everyone else is too, of course. That's just human nature. And so one of the good things about this is that we got to see there actually wasn't necessarily agreement on everything with people's different ideas. So that's nice to know. We had these technical meetings that some were quite well attended. We talked about things like parks and open space and housing and neighborhood character. And those are a bit more of an intimate, sort of roundtable setting, and we just had a discussion. People shared with us their thoughts. So some of the things we've heard, that new development should aim to preserve Gallatin's character, that buildings should be designed to last rather than just sort of being throwaway or kind of pop them up and don't count on them to last for very long. That trees and other natural features should be preserved rather than just clear-cutting sites whenever somebody's going to develop something. Encourage traffic calming measures, need a variety of housing types and prices. Gateways into the city need aesthetic improvements. We want to get rid of the armpits and the eyesores we heard about. So accommodate for multimodal transportation infrastructure, so you have sidewalks, bike lanes, and various road improvements to allow people to get around rather than just having to get in their car and cause, it's a funny thing about traffic. People complain about traffic, but what people often forget is that you are your neighbor's traffic, right? So you're the car next to somebody who they're complaining about. So we want to help solve that. People asked to expand outdoor dining opportunities and then create meaningful public open space that also can function for stormwater management. And we heard many, many other things. These are just a few of the highlights. So here are the results of the mapping exercises. So we took all the dots from each of the different tables and made them into one big map. We can start to see some patterns of where the dots start to show up. So you see, there's no pointer, but anyway, you'll start to see clusters. We obviously key in on the clusters of red or clusters of blue. The green stuff, though, we also look at because we want to be informed by the things that you love as we're starting to write rules and regulations for new development. So we say, well, what is it that people like about these areas, and how can we translate that into what's happening in the future? So zoning 101, in case you're not a zoning expert, zoning implements the vision of the comp plan, groups land into different zones, usually based on use, and then there are rules about what you can build in each zone, but doesn't cause things to be built, it just allows for it to be built. In your comprehensive plan, you have these different character areas. And we had some discussions during one of the meetings about the character areas and how the character areas in the comprehensive plan relate to the zoning ordinance, and so I'm going to show you that a little bit here in a second. But you have in the middle the darker brick color is the downtown core, and then you have what's called general urban. Outside of that, you have suburban, and then you have, if you look very, very carefully, there's a couple of little specks of green on here. That's what's called rural. And then you have a little bit of the natural conservation in brown around the edges of the water. So this is your zoning district. These are your zoning districts right now. One of the things that we talked about throughout this process is how to simplify, because for a town this size, that you have an inordinate number of zoning districts, right? That's a huge confetti here. You don't normally need that many. And so we talked about getting rid of a lot of them. However, as we've been looking more into it, what we figured out is that you see all these that say PUD and PRD on the side of it in the parentheses all down there. So those are special zoning districts that have been created for a particular project or a particular area, and we're not sure that we can actually do away with those. And so they have to carry on into the future. We're looking into it, but that's kind of our initial thought right now, which means that we're going to have a bunch of these sort of less leftover vestigial zoning districts that are specific to a particular place or project. But unless you're doing something in that project, you don't really have to look at it, I suppose. So we'll sort it out. We'll get into more detail. But here is actually overlaying your different character areas on your zoning map, okay? Because somebody was asking, like I said, about how do the zoning districts sync up with the character areas, because the character areas are very, very wide swaths of land, and they have a description within them in the comprehensive plan, and it says what a general urban or suburban or rural means. However, when you look at it, you can actually start to see that there's still a bunch of different zoning districts within each of those. Now, some of those may sync right up with the comprehensive plan and be quite rational, but others may be in conflict with that. Now, that's one of the things about a comprehensive plan, is that it is intended to be visionary or forward-looking, right? And so when somebody comes in to rezone something, or for instance, when we're working on a new zoning ordinance, you can look and see, kind of, well, what zoning districts or what properties don't really make sense based, on what you're looking to do in the future, and how can we adjust that going forward? Or when somebody comes in with a rezoning application, you can compare it to the comprehensive plan and see, does it make sense based on that character area that's defined in the comprehensive plan. But at the end of the day, the zoning zoning districts contain the rules and regulations. The comprehensive plan is higher level, and while it's been adopted and is regulatory in some sense, the zoning is where the rubber meets the road, and so that's the most important place to get it right. So modernizing the code, what we've done so far, for those of you who've been here, we talk about this, we've been measuring, documenting, trying to understand the DNA of the community, especially those places where you put green dots. We've asked about, what are your favorite streets? What areas do you love the most? Are there any new developments that you actually like? And we've looked at all of those things. And so from that, we've taken the information in your current zoning districts, and we started. This was before we had understood all the different PUD and PRD things, but started trying to consolidate. And then also, we're going to be talking about here in a minute, the idea of, you have your character areas in the comprehensive plan. We talk about character districts or character zones for the zoning. So that idea of character still continues on, but in a more specific way. And so we start to translate your existing zoning districts into character. So some of the simplification coming up, we've been looking at reorganizing the articles, grouping similar or related topics. Thought that was my phone, have the same ringer. I was like, I know I turned the ringer off. It's okay. It's been ringing all day and scaring us, that's why I think so. Grouping similar or related topics, having all the definitions in a single location, so you're not having to search for things all the time, adding tables and illustrations, simplification of overly complicated text. Sometimes that's hard. It is zoning after all, and it's a legal document, and also we try to make it as simple as we can, but sometimes there's still some stuff you scratch your head about, but hopefully it's not this part that's important to you. So we want to have a reduction or elimination of subjective standards, right? So that's one of those things we talked about. One of the roles of what we try to do when we're working on zoning ordinances is really start to take the uncertainty out of it. So you all know what to expect when somebody said, you hear a development's going to come and somebody's going to do something in the piece of property, you can count on that you have a general idea of what it will be like because you know what the zoning ordinance says. You've all been part of this process, and you don't have to be afraid of it because the standards are objective rather than subjective. So then having district standards with an emphasis on character and context, and that's sort of the main push of this is because you have zoning districts already that are done sort of the other way that we talked about, where it's just separating uses. However, you'll still have uses, right? Uses will still be there. They just won't be the most important thing, and you'll have a nice use table, and different uses will be tied to different character districts or character zones. You'll have things like frontages. So these are new tools you'll have to help you figure out the character and be more specific about character. So we have frontage types, things like common yards, porches, stoops, shop fronts. Nothing revolutionary about those things. They have building types like houses and duplexes, and row houses, live works. And we've talked all throughout the process about having a variety of housing types. And so I wanted to, in the opening presentation, I had like one slide that had sort of a bunch of all different housing types. So I've given us one slide for each type here. And again, not that you've never seen these things, but just so we're all speaking the same language. So this would be a single-family detached house. And they come in all shapes and sizes, right? So from big ones to small ones, medium ones, et cetera. These are duplexes, right? And, part of the reason I show you some of these things too is because often when you see something besides a single family house, it's in the context of a project or development, a more modern development, and you forget about how lovely these typologies can be in places that you might actually go on vacation. You'd be so thrilled to stay in something like, it's in New Orleans there, the top middle. So these are single family attached, also known as row houses or townhouses. And these are versions where the townhouse actually has a town that it goes with instead of just a parking lot. And they're mixed in with other types. So you can see, down the street there's single family house past those row houses. Just behind those row houses there's single family. You can't see it in that image, but just to the left and to the right there's single family houses there. And so it's not such a monoculture of 100 townhouses all the same type. And you notice too the architectural variety that's accomplished in these. It's nothing crazy, and there's some repetition, but it's not all the same. And one of the big differences is you notice there's no garages on the front of these. So there's actually a human door on the ground floor, and the garage comes from the back off of a rear alley, a rear lane. And that's part of what makes them feel so nice. Cottage courts, we heard a lot of talk about. Showed a picture or two of this in the opening, and people really responded to it. But here's a whole wide variety of cottage courts. Tiny houses, sometimes they're also found in cottage courts, but sometimes they're on their own. And you've probably all seen TV shows about Tiny House Nation and all these things, and so they've become quite popular. But it's neat because this is actually, again, not a new thing. They used to have really small houses. They didn't call them anything but small houses. Or I mentioned the other day mill worker houses in Monroe, Georgia, where we're working. They look just about like these. And then a couple of these are really tiny. These are sort of backyard accessory units. So there'd be a bigger house on the front, and then they have this in the back. And so somebody might rent it out, or you might have it for guests, or you might have it for your kid when they graduate from college and they're still looking for a job or whatever. The one in the middle there, that pink one, actually, and the ones to the left of it, those are actually a kit from Home Depot. They were done after Hurricane Katrina, and instead of those FEMA trailers that everybody was living in, a group of architects and planners from around the country got together and worked with Lowe's or Home Depot, one of the two. And you could basically buy it, and they ship all the stuff and drop it, and then you have your builder put it together or something like that. But there's plenty of images of those too being brought in. They come on the back of a truck, actually. They can pre-make them off-site, and then you literally put them on the foundation. And so obviously a bunch of time savings and cost savings, and you just look how cute those are. So apartments, we've talked a lot about most places we work, people say they're not really excited about apartments, and we talked about this because normally people associate that with sort of suburban style garden walk-up apartments with parking lots all around them and breezeways running through. And again, we forget that apartments used to be done like these, actually, except for all of these are new. So these are like 4 and 6-plex units, maybe that's like an 8-plex. So those are all new. And then here's a sort of mid-scale multifamily. Again, variety of architecture, really nice. And then we mentioned live-work units where somebody lives above a shop. It could be the owner of the store, so it's a great way for them to not have 2 mortgages, or you can rent it out above or rent it out below, additional income that way. So as we start to look at the zoning standards, we're going to, just try to make it real simple. So like, how many stories is the building, right? This building is 2 stories. What is the setback? So there's this sort of setback from the sidewalk or from the right-of-way. What is the frontage type? This one has a shop front frontage type. What is the building type? This is a mixed-use building type. What is the glazing percentage? Well, what do we mean by glazing? Glazing is the window. What percentage of the wall is windows? And there will be standards that tell you how much it has to be. And then has space, civic space standards. We talked about this. You all are very fond of open space, and we've heard there's not enough of it, and developments aren't incorporating it enough when they're building new projects. And so we'll have all these different standards about different types of open space, or civic space we call it. And there will be requirements to have it in projects. And so new developments have a certain percentage of formal open space, and you can have passive open space as well. And so we heard a lot in our discussions about having open space that's useful, usable, not just sort of leftover afterthought, whatever they couldn't develop. Now that said, a lot of times when a community is not really excited about growth, they say, well, you shouldn't get to count that because you couldn't build on that anyway. It's not causing you, any pain by giving us that land. However, you can do really, really beautiful and amazing things in areas that are floodplain. You can put trails and hillsides that are too steep to build on. You can do all kinds of things that have public benefit to it. So I tend to try to not be too punitive about that, so we can get more open space, because we want to work with and sort of partner with those who are building these projects. So it's a win-win for everybody. And then sign standards and the sign types will be types that are add to the quality and character of the community. So I showed these images the other night, but Character District 1 would be natural, so this is nature. This would be rural, Character District 2. Character District 3, suburban. And these are your R zones, current R zones, and then again, these are I think some of these have the PUD, PRD kind of things as part of it, so we're still getting our mind around that, but you'll have those carried forward. General urban, and then urban center would be like in downtown here. And then your special districts for the things that don't neatly fit into the other districts, but they're necessary for the town. So this is where it gets fun, but I need to give lots of caveats before we show some demonstration areas. So we were looking around based on the things that we heard from all of you, the things that you're wondering about, interested in exploring, or just things you said that gave us an idea. And so we picked a few spots and did some drawings, some plans for those areas, and then some renderings to go along with that. Now that said, if you happen to own a piece of property in any of these areas that we've drawn, we know we haven't talked to you and we don't have permission, but we aren't proposing any of this either. We could have picked any number of spots around the city to demonstrate this. It's really just to say, given these features of this piece of property or this area, here is how these ideas that we've all been talking about the past several days could be incorporated. But the reason why we do it, though, is to actually be able to get some feedback from you guys. So it's not so much about like, do you like the idea? Oh, in some cases, sure it is. But even like, does that feel like too much? Does that feel like too little? Does that feel, like how does this feel as we go? So there's so many things that we talked about over the past several days, though we couldn't plan for all of them. So we have a few things here that we've done in the past couple of days. So as we were looking around and we were hearing about growth and development, hearing about, get all these new developments, and we heard concerns and complaints about, these apartments or the townhouse development or this or that, we started just trying to think about, well, how can we show how you can incorporate some of these things into one development rather than having them be different pods, like we talked about the townhouse pod or the apartment pod or the single family pod. And we noticed that there are a few actually in this area around the Gap distribution center that already actually had some civic spaces in them, and the buildings were kind of oriented around the civic spaces, but they tended to be like, one was a townhouse grouping, one was an apartment grouping, one was a single family grouping. And we thought, well, wouldn't that be interesting if we could, just say, well, what if we had done this differently, and actually instead of them being all done separately like that, and each piece of property had its one product, that's what developers call it, by the way, product on it. what if we brought those things together and we started to incorporate some of those discussions we were having about conservation and some of the ideas we were having about agrihood and agriculture. The thing that's neat about this area is that because you have the gap distribution there, it's, there's obviously a lot of jobs represented in those footprints of those buildings, unless it's all robots, but hopefully there's jobs in there. And then also just below it, there happens to be the community college. And so oftentimes people who are working in a distribution center and people who are going to community college often have similar needs for housing, right? And so we were looking about, okay, well, maybe if we brought these things down closer to that, now all these people could walk to work, they could walk to school, and it could, solve some of the traffic problems that we have. And then in our theoretical world that we're making up here, those developments, those properties could be left for true conservation, right? And they could be not developed on. So we did a little plan, and we basically counted the number of units of those areas and brought them down here, and I'll zoom in for you. And so what you can start to see is, I'll give anything for a pointer. So these darker brick-colored buildings are the multifamily buildings in that apartment complex up there. It's the same footprint as those apartments. And then the orange, that color orange, those are townhouses. And then this yellowish orange are single-family houses. And then you see where we preserve the trees, and then all this green space amongst them is open for agriculture, open for civic spaces. And so we've converted this into an agrihood. And then at the very, very top, by that big, huge horseshoe-shaped green space up there, which is nearly the length of 2 football fields, by the way. It's huge. Hard to get a sense of scale for it. That is the footprint of the church that I forgot to point out. There in the left top. So the church has a really big footprint. So you remember how they used to put churches in neighborhoods? And so now, and then the couple of lots next to the church might be the parsonage. The pastor could live there or whatever. Anyway, so of course, I'm sure there's probably already a master plan for this property. It's probably going to be something else. Who knows? But we just wanted to illustrate it because it was so close to this and close to this. And you could imagine trails going through there. People could walk. It could be kind of a neat situation. But you also notice that in each of these groupings, let's call this actually a neighborhood, right? Each of these is its own little neighborhood, and they all have a big civic space or neighborhood park in the middle of them, and the density is sort of gathered around that, so you have more people in the park space. And then as you move out from the center, it gets less and less dense until you get to the either forest or field. And then there's another neighborhood center up there, and then one over there. And then we've connected through to the other neighborhoods or subdivisions that are nearby. And then we have at the top, at the intersection in the middle, along the main boulevard there, commercial node. So you could also get your daily needs met for, you could have some restaurants and, a little convenience kind of grocery kind of stuff, or, whatever you need. And then there's another one down at the Enterprise Drive intersection as well. So it's really, self-contained community, live, work, play, grow, all the things in that one spot. And so this is a view looking from here over this green space, okay? And so you can see the apartments. This is what these bigger white buildings are here. And then townhouses on either side of the green space, and then single-family houses all around. And then you see the agriculture, the fields up and taking you up through the civic space on to the other side of the boulevard over there. So it all fits in very nicely in a way that you would recognize as, feels like a traditional town, right? Instead of a development or subdivision. Now this is, we didn't get this one rendered quite as far as I would have liked to, so it looks a little bit cold because it's just a computer graphic, but it's still, you get the idea. So we heard about these gateways. Welcome to Gallatin. Don't know. And just so you know, this is normal. Most cities' gateways aren't that great. People aren't putting their best foot forward because they count so much on their downtown or historic core. Even look at Franklin. When you get off of the interstate, and it's like the worst part, and you're driving through, the strip malls and all that stuff, and then crazy enough, all of a sudden the road starts to transform and become these, lovely historic houses. And next thing you know, you're in the square and it's all the same road. You just never, like if you showed somebody a picture from one end of the road to the other, you wouldn't even believe it's the same road. So it's possible that even a road that isn't so great today can be transformed into something that is much better. So this is the intersection of roads whose names aren't written on the map. This is the coffee shop called Stomping Grounds. Yes, up there. And then there's the gas station at the Y. There's a Hardee's, and this is Food Lion, I think. Yep. Okay. So, again, anybody that own these properties, this is not a proposal. This is to illustrate how you can do this, because you have plenty of other areas that aren't putting their best foot forward, that what we would call kind of a suburban retrofit situation. So you've got the big parking lot in front of the sort of big footprint building, or the fast food drive-throughs, all that kind of stuff, and you say, well, how can that be anything better than it is? And so we took a few liberties and we did some sketching, and here it is. So here's the Food Lion. This is literally just on top of. So the gas stations, you have two of them, and they've been turned into what we call gas backwards. And so the pumps actually are in the back, and then the convenience store part of it is up to the street with a shop front on the street. And you don't see all the pumps and all that, but you can still have easy access to get in and out of it. We have added, Erica, would you dig in my front pocket of my backpack and grab a clicker with a pointer on it? My arm's getting sore here. I'm feeling the burn. And I'm not pointing at it either. I feel like I am, but let's see. We have these drive-through buildings. So this is the Sonic right here, and then we've done what we call liner buildings all around the outside of it. So you have this thin edge of good stuff, of things that don't need to have a really deep store, but they can still have a nice shop front and create a streetscape there. Thank you. Yay! Hallelujah. Save me. Okay, this is how it's done. Right, so right here, this is also a drive-through fast food situation. And so you actually, rather than having curb cuts all over the place here, making it difficult and dangerous to drive down, you actually turn in here and you go down the rear lane. And then there's actually a drive-through. You order here and then you pick up on the side. I've seen this before. It's nothing, earth-shattering, but and then these are existing single-family houses that are there. There's some office buildings that are there. So this is what it looks like right about now. Lots and lots of asphalt. When it comes to being sustainable, not so great. When it comes to, there's this whole heat island effect, so the asphalt heats things up. Not so great. And I think you actually do have these real sidewalks here. They're actually sidewalks. So I don't know how often you want to walk down there. And usually, like if you probably see somebody walking on that sidewalk, you say, oh, do you need some assistance, right? Because who really wants to walk out there, right? And so, however, you could do something a bit more like this. So here's the gas backwards. That's the coffee shop there. Gas backwards with the pumps in the back. Here's the drive-through with the side window there. Here's Food Lion. We've gussied up the front of it a little bit, but nonetheless, it's here. So its parking lot's hidden. There's the Sonic. You can still circulate around the Sonic. Saving trees, having sidewalks and street trees, and Just a much more pleasant and inviting experience. So that was, kind of, again, could be applied to any gateway, those similar concepts, or not even a gateway, maybe the South Water, I guess that is a gateway, but, kind of any sort of suburban strip highway that you have here. So lots of you asked for cottage courts. You said, where can we do a cottage court? And I actually forgot to point out in the first plan that I showed you near the gap distribution, there was actually a cottage court or two in the plan. But we thought it would be kind of neat to see one a bit closer in, because sometimes, if a lot of the people who are interested in cottage courts are looking to like downsize and have something smaller, but it might be nice to just meet your housing needs, but you also don't want to be out in the middle of nowhere. Maybe you'd like to be in the thick of things a little bit more. And so we found a spot. This is what's it called? Christian Towers. Your landmark building in downtown. It's, I think, one of your tallest. But thankfully, it was the courthouse, the new building there that's going in, is rivaling it for it's the tallest building. It's a bit more photogenic than the new one is. So, but we noticed that there was a sort of gap here. There's a couple of buildings, historic, pretty cute little building here. This one is okay, looks like it's probably from the 40s maybe, I don't know, I'm just guessing. So if the CPA who runs this office in here sees this, please don't get upset. This is just an idea. This is not a proposal. But we wanted to show you how you could do a cottage court right in the downtown area. And so what we actually are showing is saving the historic building that's there. And then these are all tiny houses. They're about, 20 feet wide, I think, by, I can't remember what deep. So I know how many square feet, I knew how many square feet they are, and we have a couple of different versions. So these are shorter, so they're less expensive. These are longer and more expensive, and they have actually a garage. And these have just sort of a pull to the side there. But you have your little pocket park. These are all they have porches facing onto the pocket park. Nice streetscape. You sit on your porch, say hello to people, walk into downtown, eat at the good restaurants, do your thing, get some coffee at the coffee shop. It'd be a pretty neat little experience. And we've tied into the existing alley network that you have there. So this is what it looks like now. This is the building I was talking about. Here's the CPA, sorry. And so there's that. So you can see we saved that building. And then there's your little cottage court, little pocket park, people frolicking, having fun, people sitting on the porch. And imagine that'd be a pretty noteworthy little infill project in your downtown. So yeah. So that's what we've been doing. Timeline and next steps. We are here now. After we leave, we're going to be taking all the notes and things we've gotten from all the great ideas and inspiration you've shared with us, and concerns too. And we'll start to synthesize that. We'll continue working on the draft of the ordinance. We'll deliver a client draft to planning staff to do a quick once-over on it, make sure we hadn't done anything wacky. And then we'll clean that client draft up, turn it into a public draft. We'll come do an open house and give you all an orientation to the draft of the ordinance. You all have a review period where you can download it or get a copy of it somehow and read it, mark it up, give comments back to staff. They'll take those comments, give us direction on what to do, and then we'll create the final version of it and deliver it sometime after spring of 2025. So let's chat. Hopes, dreams, fears, aspirations, anything that we missed the mark, anything we forgot, or you're surprised that we didn't talk about, anything you liked. Well, that's also good. So yes, sir. Oh, the microphone's coming to you. You want me to have the cord and you take it? Yeah.
Hello, it's me. Can't keep my mouth shut in these things. One of the things that we had talked about possibly was, and I know you said you can't talk about everything, and there's not, but there was the possibility of pedestrian-only streets, like the square or something. But when I was speaking with one of your coworkers prior to the meeting, she had said you had talked about something along those lines. Can you address that?
Yeah, so I was looking at it after you all mentioned it, and I think it was specifically mentioned in the context of the little back road around the square. And normally I'm always apprehensive about doing it because so many times in the 70s or so they shut down main streets to traffic and they all died. There's like 5 of them that survived in the country, like Pearl Street in Boulder, Church Street in Burlington, Vermont, a few other ones, and but so many died. But it looks like Yarls is practically shut down already, and you can see the results. It seems to be a bit struggling over there. So I don't know that it could be worse if you shut it down. Yeah.
Thanks, Pascal. Sorry about that. I want to say it's in the Bronx. And again, different animal altogether. But what they decided to do was to make this one particular road for like 30 blocks pedestrian only during the day, and then like traffic up until a certain point in the morning, and then traffic after. The kids walk to school, people are out, playing checkers and hanging out, reading books in the middle of the street. They added some landscaping and things, and it works, for everybody.
Yeah.
And I thought that was an interesting concept. And again, totally different animal. But then the article also talked about streets in Barcelona where they started doing that, and then more and more neighbors said, we want pedestrian only. And they started doing it in specific neighborhoods, and now it's just all over. And I realized Manhattan and Barcelona are not Gallatin. But I thought the one where they close it off for certain periods of time and then open it for certain periods of time was really an interesting concept.
Yeah. Yeah, for sure. And there's even another sort of hybrid that's in the U.S. is usually called a shared street, but in Europe it's called a Wohnhof. And we actually are doing more and more of those in new developments today. And some cities are actually turning existing streets into them. And basically what that means is it's pedestrian priority. And so you literally will have planters, like with a big planter with a tree, and like picnic tables and stuff, and cars kind of just slowly at idle speed practically sort of creep through, and it's wonderful place to be. You need study for sure on your downtown because you've got a beautiful square and it seems to be really struggling, a couple of sides do well, but those sides seem to do better for commercial activity, but from a pedestrian experience, at least as an outsider, when we're walking, it's a bit, it feels a bit speedy, yeah. Yes. So.
Ryan, first, thank you and your team for being there, and for everybody who can participate. Unfortunately, not that many people, because when they hear code, they think it's boring, and it is.
Hey,
but you made it great. That's where I was coming to. And we had a great time. The discussion were good. That was, I think, a really good forum. And I missed last night. But I watched you on after, so I didn't really miss it. But my question is, I really like what you show there, but we are at the point where there's so much stuff what been approved who doesn't do that. At one point, where do we hit the point of no return? Because your presentation of moving, near the gap, that I like that, and I'm not a proponent of apartments and townhouses, but that looked fantastic. So my question is, at what point do we hit the point of no return to implement that and to make sure the city looks like that.
Yeah, it's a fair question, and because we do a lot of work in New England in places that are really, really historic, and they're built out. The buildings that are there are end of life, and they're asking us to come in and help them figure out how to prepare for those buildings to be torn down, and what's the next iteration, not the historic stuff, all the stuff they did badly in the 60s, 70s, 80s, post World War II. And so the zoning is really seen as a retrofit and a rehabilitation, similar to what we showed on the Gateway, right? And unfortunately, a lot of the new buildings aren't built to last, even new homes. But I wouldn't count on that. One of the things that we have seen is when the new code is advantageous in a community that has really been, tamping down growth and, sort of knocking the number of units down. There are plenty of people who would be willing to, if they could do more with the property, go through the process of actually changing their entitlements if they knew they weren't going to get their teeth kicked in throughout the process. So there may be some ways to incentivize some people to go ahead and do something different than they had planned on. But at the end of the day, even if it's just an incremental thing that happens bit by bit, it's better than nothing. I think there are times, especially once you get a new code that can do all of these things adopted, where you'll see a sign go up and is this going to be one under the new code? And oh man, it's one of the old code projects. Shoot, there's never a point of no return, because there always is the retrofit, and hopefully there's the inspiration factor and people do something different.
Yes, I'm kind of piggybacking on that. Some of the designs you showed, like where the coffee shop and the service station, the rear service station, all that, and the tiny houses downtown. I mean, what do you do to facilitate that transformation? I mean, the people that own it now, are like, well, we like it the way it is now. So what do you do? What can we do as a city to kind of facilitate the transformation?
Yeah. So, and one of the reasons, just as I give you a little secret to in some ways how we think about sites to look at, we tend to not pick sites where we think people are are really in love with it, right? And so, I mean, the Gateway, I don't know if many people are say, oh, we like that how it is, right? And that little empty spot with the parking lot there where the cottage court was shown, again, it's sort of a leftover, space. And so a lot of times people will see, oh, that's allowed? Oh, that's what somebody wants? Well, we've even seen times where, there's a project in Vermont where a group of senior citizens who were looking to downsize all got together and came up with a plan and created a web page, and were basically looking for a developer to go build this thing for them, saying, hey, we'll sign up right now. Well, from a developer's perspective, that's quite valuable. They've got essentially, pre-sold or pre-leased or whatever. And so there's some proactive things that you could do. It's obviously quite simple on a little cottage court, much more complicated on the Gateway retrofit. That Gateway, for instance, is challenging because there's multiple property owners, right? And so whenever we do a retrofit plan like that, even if it's like a lot of times we'll do a mall redevelopment project, and even a mall, they'll have some of the anchors will own their own property and some won't, and some of the out parcels will, and so it's like this patchwork quilt of the lot lines, and so it's sometimes challenging, but the first and easiest thing you can do is just make it possible. And the zoning does that, and then somebody, just for their own economic benefit, goes, wow, look at this, I can do that. Before I could simply just do commercial. Now I can do commercial. I can put a couple of residential units above. I did that math. Oh, that works. Let's go. Sometimes it's hard though, like the character and quality, like that road that goes by the Gap plate. We were looking at that road and we're like, man, it's like a freeway dimensionally, you know. When you look at the number of cars, I mean, maybe when it's quitting time, it's different. But when we were out there, it was like nothing. It seems to be quite a vigorous engineering effort on that road. And so we do what's called a road diet. And so you start to try to narrow it up, at least where it goes through a village or something like that, so that you can feasibly and safely walk from one side to the other, and so it all works together. And so some of that kind of stuff, like a road diet, would take investment from the city. But a lot of times, if a developer's coming in and the developer's like, "Can we please narrow this road?" And the city's like, "Oh no, it's not meeting our engineering standards, so you got to leave it wide." And they're like, "Oh, the developer would be willing to do it if they were allowed to." So there's just a lot of it's just permission, giving people permission to do stuff and making sure people understand. And so if you have an economic development agency or something like that, making sure that they understand that you've got more than just industrial sites to market, which is normally what economic development groups focus on, because that's obvious. But now it's like, oh, we've got this advantageous zoning ordinance, and we're changing the character of our city, and in a positive way, in a way that other, like a lot of businesses these days are looking. You all see, like, well, how do we attract employees? Well, we want to have our offices or whatever in a place where our employees want to be, and so the more cookie cutter it is, and the less walkable and less mixed use and all that stuff these days, the people that they're trying to recruit are not interested in that, and so you become less and less competitive. So yeah, getting the zoning is the most important thing you can do. Yes, sir.
So, sorry about that. You've mentioned that a big concern is green space, and the trade-off for high density seems to be green space. We have more high density, it gives us opportunity for green space. What can the zoning be written in such a way, what would keep that green space today from being more high density tomorrow? Is there any kind of restriction? That's a concern of mine.
Yeah, it's a fair question. In one of the meetings we talked about this a little bit, and any city has a certain amount of potential market share that it will get, right? So a certain number of people are interested in moving here. And so for some period of time, you can kind of divert that to where you want it to go. But to your point, if the other land that you've diverted away from isn't protected in some way, then that's just available in the future. So there are kind of two different approaches. One is you say, well, that's okay, we're at least being smart, we're having smart growth, and it'll take longer for it to feel like it's gone everywhere, and by then maybe I won't care, or maybe I won't be here, or whatever. Or you can take proactive measures to actually get land into conservation. And so, as you can imagine, there are a number of ways in which you can do that. One is somebody can donate their land, and or the city can buy land, or, and I can't remember, do we do TDRs in Tennessee? Is it allowed? So you have a transfer of development rights. And so we often talk about, people say, well, we want to preserve that farm, and then and the farmer says, oh no, we don't. I've been waiting for a long time to develop this land. My family has, and we're counting on it. And so it's a way that essentially the property owner, let's call it the farmer, can sell the development rights from their property, and they can be transferred to a different piece of property where you want growth to be. And so it could be densified, but the other land is permanently conserved. And so there are ways that you can do that. It's called a transfer of development rights, or TDR is a shorthand, so Google it if y'all haven't done any research on it. Sometimes it's tricky though, because if you have as much available land as you do, and land prices are as they are, and people can just go rezone whatever they want, then it sort of messes with the market, of the, like they call them sending zones and receiving zones. And so if you've got, you have to be kind of hold the line about where growth can and can't occur. Part of that, you can save yourself money by not sending infrastructure all over the place, right? So you can limit your infrastructure investment to a smaller area, and so there's a benefit to you in doing that, and that can be sort of how you determine where your growth boundary is, if you call it that. So, who's got the mic?
Is it on? Good.
Yeah.
Sorry. My name's Cal Gentry. I'm actually a developer, and just wanted to say a few things. I really liked what I saw. The lack of brick on the new homes and the interesting exterior materials, I thought looked just amazing. Just the different pictures of the different products up there. I'm excited about doing some different things. So that was really neat. Cottage courts, tiny houses, ADUs. We had a chamber luncheon today where we talked about affordable and attainable housing, and I personally feel like those are a great next step to providing places to live for our kids moving back from college, empty nesters needing something a little bit smaller. I think if we can add those into the code somehow, I think that's a great addition. And I wanted to just speak to the gentleman who said, how do we get people to redevelop along these plans? And truly, just to boil it down to the basics, leaving this stuff and the changes to the zoning code profitable. Meaning don't put so many restrictions in it that you can never redevelop something, because these are great ideas, and I would love to see Gallatin turn into exactly what we've been seeing on the screen. And then I wanted to comment on just a couple of the plans. The gap example, the clustering of units, preserving the green areas, I think that is the absolute best way for us all to move forward, where we keep those important forested areas, creeks, and even just big open fields where we live in smaller areas together, and then we enjoy those together. What I did see in the plan was a lot of streets in the front and a lot of streets in the back.
Alleys. Yeah.
And from personal experience, it gets so expensive to double load those roads and to build roads that don't have any units on them at all, that I would just caution us to not make all alley or push the alley loaded thing as far as, that's what I think it's the best looking too, but not push it that way, or allow for a lack of a frontage road. Just have a pedestrian corridor in front of it where the alley becomes the true road and it's behind it. So just some considerations of cost in that one. And then just some questions. So in your example at the other gateway, where you had ringed the Sonic, for instance, with some interesting product, that would look great. It would look great. But what allowances are we going to leave in the zoning code for standard development? Because a Sonic can't come to your town and won't come to your town if they don't have presence and frontage on the roadways. So how is the change in the code? I love the way it's looking, but how do we incorporate the way things, while we're transitioning to this new different type of development, how do we keep those services accommodated?
Yeah, those are all great questions. So one thing I'll start with is something that I haven't mentioned yet, but it's a fine-grained detail, but it's an important one. So that 75% brick requirement that you guys have is a thing we see in a lot of similar cities, where you've been getting sort of very conventional suburban growth for years, and the reaction to that is to say, well, if we're going to get this stuff that we're not really excited about, at least we'll make it be brick, because brick looks nicer than X, Y, and Z. Did the same thing in Nolensville. On the other hand, they said in Nolensville they wanted small town charm, and we've heard a lot of you talk about similar language. When you look at most small towns, only the most fancy houses would have been made of brick. And so they would have been siding, maybe there would have been brick or stone on the foundation, something like that. So we typically don't recommend that you have that requirement, and we've taken it out of Nolensville. The developers love it for the cost, but also you just get a better, a less homogeneous look, because the thing about it is, unless you're like in the Cotswolds in England or something, where it's known for all being made of the same stone and all the roofs of the same material, and there's something charming about that. Well, the part of the charm of that is the buildings themselves are really cool, historical buildings, the spaces between the buildings, the little country lanes and the little sheep in the town green space. And, when you've got more sort of normal, regular architecture being done at large scale in a development, having it all be the same material gets a bit much. So anyway, that's a fine point, but we'll be looking at that level of detail in the code. So to your, how do you sort of do the reality check question, that's a great point. The way that we do it is one, and I didn't mention this yet, or this time, but we've talked about it a little bit in the past, the more character specific, where you're intending to have this more walkable, mixed use, vibrant kind of, let's call it downtown-esque character, wouldn't be necessarily zoned everywhere, right? So there'll still be some areas that are conventional zoning, housing wise as well as commercial wise. And that's one of the reasons why gateways are kind of important, because if you got to pick somewhere, let's get the gateway. It happens to use most gateways also at sort of an important intersection. The extent to which you kind of how big you spread it, because it doesn't take much to have a big impact. You get a little bit of good stuff at one spot, it doesn't take much. And then the other thing is grandfathering, right? And so if something's here, like Sonic doesn't have to go do that right away, but if somebody's going to redevelop it, if they're going to do something, then the standards would kick in. What we find is that, especially if you don't have the more character-specific standards everywhere, then Sonic says, oh, well, I can't go at the gateway, but I'm going to go in this other spot. And then, some communities where we work in, they're like, you know what? We kind of got the Sonic. We got the Hardee's. We got the this. We got that. And that's probably enough of that. And so how do we, and so those are the kind of decisions that the city's going to have to make as to, how rigorous they want standards to be, how far afield each of the different zoning districts will be. So it can be dialed up or down, however, you all decide you want it to be. But to his point, y'all may all be going, yes, turn it up to 11, and it's, you gotta be reasonable, because you don't want to just sort of put the town out of business, so who's got the talking stick?
To your point, I didn't catch your first name. I think you said
Cal.
Gentry. I lived in Florida for a very long time, and I lived on the East Coast, and there are a lot of towns that are newer over the decades. They came in and built on swampland, and they came in knowing what they wanted those towns and villages to look like. So the Sonics, the McDonald's, the Hardee's, the Starbucks, they aren't roadfront. They're not street front, I mean. There's great landscaping, and the signage is incorporated in the landscaping, and people know where the Sonic is, and they know where the McDonald's is. And it honestly makes the Sonic and the McDonald's more attractive. It's like, wow, that's a great looking McDonald's sign in that landscaping. Let's go to McDonald's. It is very possible, and those restaurants, those fast food places, are still eager to move into those towns.
Yeah.
If you want them.
Yeah, that's a good point. Oh, I forgot one thing. When you talked about the alleys, in the single, or the roads without any frontage on them, both of those are all good points. What we want to do is make sure that you can easily do either, or do both, but if you're going to not have an alley in a certain location, for instance, so maybe when around your little neighborhood's green space where there's the townhouses and more density, and you don't want, because the townhouse, if it has a garage off the front, it's the whole front. And so there'd be an alley there, but as you move out from the center, you would have it be street loaded. But when you do have it street loaded, based on the feedback that we've been getting, where that garage is located and how that floor plan works for that garage, is kind of the magic. So you can get sort of the best of both worlds. Yes, sir.
Two questions. I remember the first time we talked was great discussion. At one point, you make a comment, a paraphrase, where you mentioned that some developments are actually not good for cities, the way they build and the way they develop. So if you could expand on that. And the second one is, I kind of agree with Cal on the development side that there's so much restriction of what they have to do that drive the cost up. So the road are one thing. We talk about sidewalk. We talk about all that stuff. And I was wondering on your depiction of what you call the small neighborhood with all the different, the pocket park and stuff. Do we really need sidewalk on development like that? Because people, if the roads are not that big, we go back on, I grew up south of France in a small village. We didn't have sidewalks, but the roads were small enough where people are careful and you can walk. So again, we talk a lot about affordable houses, but if we don't reduce the cost of building at one point and the cost we put on developers, we're never going to get anything affordable because the costs go up and up and up. So in this kind of cluster with small park and stuff like that, do you see anywhere, because you're everywhere, this kind of development going away from this kind of, sidewalk stuff and more stuff that the city want?
Yeah, so I would say that, this idea of character, and I showed you all that continuum from natural to urban. There are points on that continuum where obviously a sidewalk is not necessary, for instance, in nature, and even the rural. Typically, though, when you get into the sort of more neighborhoods, like, and you can see it, in a historic city, normally the most loved neighborhoods have sidewalks and street trees. I would, if we could have a conversation with engineering and fire and they were willing to let us design a road that was small enough that it was actually reasonable and safe for people to walk in the road, I would be more than happy to do that. It's just, unfortunately, we're in America and that is not normally how we get to do it. And so we're getting lucky if we get a 10-foot drive, travel lane, even though we know you can go down to 9 foot easily. And the place we're working right now, they put in this traffic calming that's called a chicane. It's kind of a little thing in the middle, and the truck has to go around it. And I was meeting with the fire chief, and he said, "Well, I'm not like normal fire chiefs." He said, I'm really into walking and biking. I was like, "Oh." He said, "Yeah." They kind of look at me funny at the station. And when the city put in those traffic calming things in the road, my guys are all belly aching and moaning, and I can't believe that. Blah, blah, blah. He said, "Guys, we're firefighters. We have a really difficult and dangerous job. But the easiest part of our job is driving the trucks. Get over it." And I was like, yes. He has a future in consulting. I'm going to take him all over the country and talk about that. Because, just the sort of modern engineering and fire standards these days tend to not be in favor of narrow streets. However, he did make a good point. If we don't have to have a road necessarily in front of the house, then that's different. And many cities, for a long time have required that you have road frontage to a lot, even though you can look at really cool and amazing places that haven't done that. And in fact, even on a tiny example, the cottage court, right? I mean, yes, there's a road there, but they actually most of them don't face a street. So there are things that we can do and things that we can allow if the city will, again, probably comes down to fire and engineering, will let us to do some of those things. So. Okay. Yes. Oh, what was the first one? Oh, yeah, I don't remember. What? I always get nervous when people paraphrase me. I said some development can be bad. Oh, I think I probably know what I was talking about. So I was saying some places that we work, the way that their tax base is derived, it is, and it depends on the locale or maybe it's the state or whatever, but, some places actually lose money on every house they build. Some places don't. Some places only make money if the house is over X, number of square feet, and so there are sort of economic reasons why there's a push for this type of development or that type of development. Some places say, well, yeah, we know we lose money on single-family houses. However, we can't get the commercial we need for our tax base if we don't have the rooftops. And so then they're just like gobbling up and getting as many houses as they can. So that's why you notice I come back often to like some data that might be helpful for you all as you make future decisions. In the meantime, we'll get you a code in place that'll protect you and let you do all this cool stuff. But as you go and determine, like if you're to explore transfer of development rights, for instance, you probably want to do some math with that and identify, have a specialist who help you identify areas and set that system up and all that. So I think that's what I was talking about, but I have a bad memory. So okay, so oh yeah, you're welcome. Thank you. Thanks for coming. Appreciate it.